Good morning, everyone. As you all are joining, please type into the chat box where you are joining us from, what part of the country. Just type in my business partner, Coach Amy Cohen, is managing the chat box today. So as you're just joining, just type in where you're joining us from, and good morning. I am joining all of you from the East Coast, and I'm looking out my window and it is pouring rain as my lawn people, which is, I guess, considered essential here in Pennsylvania, are still mowing my lawn and it's pouring. So I think they just got caught in the rain. So I'm not sure what the weather is like there, but would love to hear where you guys are calling in from and all of that. So, but welcome. And I can't believe it's Thursday already. And as everyone says, it's like Groundhog Day, because Thursday and Saturday and Monday and Sunday are, pretty much all the same nowadays. So, but as you're joining, today is part 4 of Leading with Grace Through a Crisis. And I've had different segments of what that actually means for leaders individually, your teams, and also organizationally, what that means, leading with grace. We all have to lead with grace, period, but through a crisis is very different. And today we're really going to talk about how we manage our brand. How do we manage your brand through a crisis? And I'm kind of rambling here, trying to waste some time until other people join us. So type into the chat box where you're calling from and what the weather's like, because if it's sunny and 80 degrees, I'm jealous. It's probably about 60 here and pouring rain. And I'm asking myself when I'm going to get my run in today, dodging through the raindrops. So as you're joining us today, we're going to actually just kind of dive right into this and managing your brand through a crisis. And we all know, I've talked on some of my other podcasts before, Leading with Grace Through a Crisis. It's really important during this time, and I'll say it again, but especially when we're managing our brand and really kind of taking a step back. It's a great time since we're all on pause. So we're all on pause right now, and it's a perfect time to really, invest in your own brand awareness. And so taking a step back and reflecting and being present and really developing some self-awareness around your brand. And so number 1 is type into the chat box and forget about through a crisis, but being able to manage your brand is time consuming as it is. It's so important to manage your own brand on how we're coming across to our customers, our clients, how we're coming through on social media. If we're using social media and that digital platform, how are we staying in touch with our clients, our customers, our vendors, our teams, our people. And if you can think about how do you manage your brand now? And just type in the chat box and just some of those ideas, and I'll have Coach Amy Cohen read some of those. And then as you're typing in how you manage your brand, think about how you should take a step back on how you manage your brand through a crisis. And so they should be, maybe a little bit different or not, but I'm interested to hear some of your thoughts. My brand or my company's brand, I try to manage my own brand. If not, someone else is going to manage your brand for you. And instead of telling your own story and sharing your own credibility and your own reputation on that digital platform or with your customers, if you're not doing that, then somebody else is managing that brand for you. And so how are you managing your brand through a crisis? And it's okay to say that I'm not doing a very good job. And I'm going to go over some things on really how we can do that better individually and also organizationally. But Coach Amy Cohen, if you're on today, can you read some of the comments on how people are managing their brand, number 1, and then how are they managing their brand through a crisis, if it's the same or if it's different. So Amy, if you want to unmic yourself.
Absolutely. Well, one of the responses that we got was around how important responsiveness is in managing your brand, and especially now more than ever. And then another response is around really providing the best customer service
Mhm.
and to be proactive and consistent messaging is key. So I think that is super important.
Okay, so the first one was being responsive.
Yep.
Okay, so
Responsive customer service,
okay,
being proactive and consistent.
okay, those are great ones. Those are great ones. So those are things that we should be doing, not even in a crisis, but if we think about how we manage our brand when we're not in a crisis, being responsive, being the customer service that we're providing, being proactive. And what was the last one about? It was around communication.
It was
Clear.
being proactive and consistent around
Okay.
messaging. Yes.
Okay. So that is great. And that's how we should be managing our brand before a crisis. So how are we managing our brand differently now in a crisis, going through a crisis? So if it's different, share how you are, again, pausing, taking a step back, and how are we managing our brand through a crisis? And then I will share some of the things that I personally am doing, that we're doing for the business as well, and what I'm actually helping my clients do. But how do you manage your brand through a crisis? So type some of those things in that you maybe be doing differently than maybe just managing your brand. And Amy, if you want to read some of those as well.
Here's a great comment. Promoting our people, sharing their stories, etc. It's not necessarily about our sport right now, but still taking this opportunity to be present on social media, which I think that's a really important point to make.
Okay. So that is great, being able to promote your people. I would say bragging about your team, bragging about your teammates, bragging about what your company is doing socially, which we'll get into in a little bit. But bragging about a teammate, bragging about what you're doing, bragging about how you're helping, and also being, I think, Amy, you said being present on social media.
Yes.
Okay. Being present. Now you can be present on social media, but how you're being present on social media through a crisis. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how we're being present. But yes, that is very, very, very important, is to actually be present and to have a presence with your customers, your clients, your vendors, and actually having a presence online. Is how we're managing our brand through a crisis is really, really important. So we're going to go on to the next slide here. Is everybody knows that technology is not one of my strong points here. But let's talk about your brand, your personal branding. And really kind of what that looks like. And it's really important as we go through a crisis. This is a great time to really take a step back, because we do have a little more time to plan, to think, to do some strategic thinking. And really, when we get through all of this, really what is your personal brand? You as an individual, and I say this all the time, as people buy into the leader before they actually buy into the vision. So people are going to buy into you before they actually buy into the product that you're selling or your company. Who cares what your company is called? Who cares what you're selling? But people are going to, they work with the people they like. They're going to buy from the people they like. You always say this when you're going to buy a car. I'm going to buy my products. I'm going to work with people that I actually like, I trust, I respect, that work hard, that have the same values that I have. So when you kind of step back and say, what is my brand now? And if you can write some words down, is how would people describe me, and how do I show up in person? How do I show up online? On email? How do I show up when I'm talking to somebody on the phone? How do I show up on a digital platform? And it's so important for all of us to really kind of take a look at what was our brand before this? What is our brand currently now? And what's our brand going to be, our personal branding, after we get through all of this? And I think everybody knows that, you know, the true colors of people come out when stuff is hitting the fan and there is a crisis. The true colors and leaders and in organizations really come out on how you are treating your customers, your vendors, your people, and really what your organization stands for. And we'll talk about culture in a little bit. So I would really suggest this is a great exercise for everyone, because it's really going to help yourself. It's going to help your business as we go through this. So write some things down as what was your brand and how would you describe your brand before? How is your brand different now? How is it shifting? What are some of those characteristics and those skills that have had to come out of you as a leader on social media or with your clients through this? It might not be selling. I get sales and growth and performance, but it might be completely something different for your people and your teams, and really kind of how your company is showing up. So write down some of, if you want to put some things in your chat box here, if you have a word, maybe just one word of your brand before we started going through this. What is your brand now? And then what, after we get through this, you know, what is that going to look like after we get through this? So you're able to control this as well. So write down, you know, in the chat box, what do you perceive as your brand before? What is your brand now? And what would you like your brand to be on the other end of this? So Amy, if anybody has typed in anything, can you read some of those out loud?
Yes, not sure we're sort of doing the past, present, and future quite yet, but some great words to describe personal brand. One is around excellence, personable, welcoming, authentic, empathetic, encouraging, grateful, authentic. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's great. So I think, you know, maybe some people before this, your brand was customer service or responsive, and I'm using some of those words before. And now your brand going through this, and I've worked with some of my clients, your brand is compassionate, very empathetic, very understanding. I've got to do a lot more listening, less pushing, you know, more, how does my brand come up more social responsible, you know, on social media? Really, you know, that's what and what's your brand going to look like once we get through this? Is it going to look like the before, the during, or the after, or maybe a blend of both? And I think if we really can take a step back, you know, should I have been a little more compassionate? Should I have been a little more mature as an executive? I should have a little more presence or a little more understanding, a little more focused around my people and less around growth and performance and leading that way. And I think once we get through this, I think we're going to find a whole different way to lead, a way to show up, and just really what your customers are actually going to be looking for when we get through this. So that's your own personal brand. You know, now I want to talk about your team brand. You know, I love teams and I love talking about team brand and ego. And, you know, I talk a lot about egos when I'm working with executive leadership teams. And when we're working with teams of very successful, high performing, sometimes type A, that DNA, kind of like myself, that DNA type A, very driven, very competitive. You know, we all have egos. We all want to be successful. We all want to win. And when you're part of a team and your team brand is, we always say, check your ego at the door. Check your ego at the door. But what's your team brand? And so as a coach, and I'm going to use some business examples and as a coach, and when you can think of some of these teams as a team brand and where you have a team ego, when you think of, for women's basketball, you women's basketball fans, when you think of the UConn Huskies, you know, they have a team ego. When you're walking through that tunnel and you're walking onto that court, man, that team's got an ego. And there's a lot of teams that get beat before the game even starts. And when you think about Alabama football, that team ego. And when you think about the Boston Celtics of the past, you know, the Chicago Bulls. These teams had egos as soon as they walked onto the floor, and they came in with this aura, and they came in with this teamwork attitude. You know, teams were already beat before they played them. And there's a healthcare, since I spent a lot of time, and I still do spend a lot of time in Minnesota, when you hear in the healthcare industry, when you hear of the Mayo Clinic, they have a team ego in healthcare. They are the best of the best of the best in the world. And so that is a team ego. And how would you like your team brand to be as an ego? I want to work with that team because of these characteristics, these values of the team. They do things the right way. They win. People are afraid to compete against them, but we all need to develop that team brand before, that team brand during a crisis. And how are we going to manage this, have this team ego and this team brand as we get through this? And so a couple of examples for a team brand before going through this. And where you have metrics and products to sell, and you have quarters to meet, you have growth performances to reach through the year, think about how your team brand functioned with vendors, with customers. Were they pushy? Were they honest? Were they transparent? Were they just trying to get the sell? Did they build relationships? Did they build partnerships? Were they helping their customers solve problems? As we all know, our clients are dealing with complex issues that they've never had to navigate through before. This was before the crisis, because our world is different. So partnering in your team brand or your business's brand is, I want to be known for, I help clients solve their complex issues that they don't even know how to solve. So it's creating a partnership and helping them be successful and helping them solve problems. So what's our team brand now managing through a crisis? You know, are we still pounding the door, trying to get sales? Are we absent? Are we not responding because we're worried about me, myself, and I? But what is our team brand and our team ego? You know, that could have shifted into how we're communicating with our clients, being more compassionate, more understanding, not trying to, hey, you know, what do you think about when we get through this? Are you going to buy from me? Or we're talking about the same things that we were before the crisis. That's not necessarily what people want to hear right now. So what is your team brand and your ego, or your team ego? Is, I want us to be caring, understanding, that we're not worried about the sales, that we're there for them. We're here to help them solve problems. And then once we get through this crisis, you know, what does that look like, our team ego after that? Are people going to want to continue working with us? Are we going to help them solve their problems? Have we thought about the things that they're going to need after we get through this? What people need after we get through this crisis is going to be completely different than what they needed 2 or 3 months ago. And if we're not thinking that way, then I would challenge you is to really start forming that with your team as well.
Pam, we're having some chat in the chat room. Something that you might want to touch on a little bit is of interest.
Okay.
Speak about what you did as a coach to offset that feeling of walking through the tunnel and not being knocked off your game. If you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so number one, it goes through preparation. Preparation and how you are messaging and how you are coming across to yourself and also your team. So as a leader, you have to be confident in preparation and in the team players that you do have. And you might be, you know, the other teams might be more talented than you, but it's you as a coach on how you show up and being confident and how positively you're talking and how much you are preparing for your teams for this competition. And every time that you walked in, there's certain things that your team has to believe, that you believe in them, that they are performing within their strengths, that you as a coach have confidence in them, that you have prepared, that they feel extremely prepared for the game, and that they are going to be able to execute and follow the game plan for that one team, each and every team. And I'm sure you do this with your clients. You go into a client and you have to be confident, and you have to make your people believe that that they're prepared. You have to prepare them. You have to give them the resources, the tools, and really make them believe in the game plan that you have set up. And, just as a coach, is like how you're messaging. No one's going to work harder than us. No one is going to beat us by our effort. And so I think it's saying those things and getting your teams to believe in that, and then, and then being able to play, being able to take those breaks and those timeouts, giving people real-time feedback throughout the games. But again, it's, I'm a coach that coaches mindset, and it starts with a leader on the mindset and the belief and the confidence that you have in yourself as a leader and as a coach, and then being able to pass that along to your teams for them to build that team ego and that team brand. That as a coach, my team's brand, no one's going to outwork us. We're going to be the hardest working team in the country, and that's what we were known for. We were also known to be one of the toughest teams in the country. We were never one of the most talented teams, but no one worked harder, no one was tougher, no one played as physical as we are, and no one was ever more prepared. And so teams didn't like to play against us because they knew they had to bring their A game. They might have been a little more talented, but they knew that they were in for a war and a battle. And it was going to be a battle till the very end, and the team was going to be prepared. But that was our team ego, and our team brand was some of those intangibles, some of those X factors, things that you can't, the things that you have to have if you're playing against the big guys. And some of you that have businesses are always playing or selling against companies that have been around a little bit longer, or have maybe a bigger brand than you do. So that's how I prepared myself. I prepared my staff. I prepared my teams, and they really believe that. Some of those games we won, some of those games we didn't. But my team walking off that court always felt good about themselves. Not that if we lost the game, that we got better each one of those games. But that was really the team brand and our program's brand, going through this. Does anybody have any questions on team and how we shape our own brand moving forward? I'll take a break here, and if anybody has any questions about how you can continue to shape your own personal brand or your team's ego moving through this and after we get through the end here. We'll move right along. So I want to talk about, first, before I talk about your companies or organizational behaviors, I want to talk about individual behaviors and where we can make a mistake as we're in a crisis. And I'm just going to assume everybody's been doing a great job with their brand before this crisis. And we've been doing a pretty good job on social media, or being responsive, being present, how we show up. But here's some of the individual behaviors that we could make as we're going through a crisis. And it's very important individually, especially for consultants, if you are CEOs, if you're team leaders, is how are you controlling your own individual brand? And I would say number one is have a plan. Have a plan for what your individual brand is around your behavior. What is your plan through this? Is it calling my clients? Is it calling all my past clients? Is it me putting out on social media every single day or twice a day on whatever it is you want to talk about? Is having a plan around really what you're going to do. Having a plan that's consistent, not, I haven't posted for 3 days. I haven't called my clients in a couple weeks. I just didn't feel like working the last couple days, so I never responded to my emails. But having a plan is being consistent. And when you do that, you become crisis proof when you have a plan And then when you hit a crisis, this isn't going to be the last crisis that we all hit. Everybody has their own crisis every single day. But you become crisis proof because it becomes consistent. Have a strategy around what your brand is, going through this crisis and as you get through this crisis. So again, have a plan. I'm sure everybody had a plan before. You should have a plan now, and moving forward after we get through this, what is my individual plan for my individual brand, going through this. The second one is don't get complacent. Don't get complacent on just really, managing your own individual brand. And when I say don't get complacent, you've got to stay focused. You've got to stay disciplined. You got to stay smart. And there is like no BS on social media. There's no BS. There's no BS on social media. There are so many things when we get complacent, and I'll give you a few examples here, what I mean by complacent. Like you got to have a plan, and you got to stick to the plan and have a strategy. And you got to be consistent. The second one is we're all getting complacent. We all can get complacent being in our houses and, not really thinking and being disciplined. There was an individual, there's a lot of people that are getting laid off and furloughs. So people are having so much more time on their hands. Don't get complacent by not managing your brand. I spend a lot of time looking at what CEOs, how they're managing their brands and what they're talking about on social media. I also I have an organization back in Minneapolis. I watch my executive director on how she's managing her brand and how she's managing our organization's brand. I look at, so I'm looking at those executive directors that are managing their personal brands as well on social media, and also the organizations. There's an individual that I know that was furloughed for 5 months, and don't get complacent is this individual has been sitting around probably, going to the liquor store too much. I don't know him personally, but, when you're looking on social media, there was a picture of this individual with tons of wine bottles stacked up in the corner of their house. And so they've been spending their time on furlough, not fired, not laid off, but on furlough, drinking a lot, wine bottles, took a picture of it with this individual's company's logo on and put it on social media. And so think about it. I think the numbers today was, correct me if I'm wrong, everyone, 16 million people that are unemployed now, and it's going to be more at the end of the month. So if you are furloughed, that means you're going back to work in a few months. This individual might not be going back to work in a few months if their companies are looking at their social media with their company's logo on them. But how are you as a leader showing up on social media and really managing your own brand through a crisis? Are you professional or you're not professional? People slip. And I would say go back and look at your social media and clean it up. And if I'm not behaving myself on social media, my spouse will come right to me and say, get that off social media, because that doesn't do me well either. So, but don't get complacent. So be active, watch what you're putting on social media, especially during this time, because everybody has a lot of time on their hands. And I will say, as leaders, this is something I did as a coach. And now that I'm actually coaching my clients as well, you also have to watch what your team is putting on social media. You've got to watch what your team is putting on social media. Yes, you do, because your people are representing your organization. Your people are representing you. Your people are representing your team. And so there are so many different times that I would have to even call my staff. I would have to call my players and say, you got to take that off social media. There's people that are doing that in corporations now, that you have to monitor what people are doing on social media. Okay. Does anybody, I'm going to pause right there. Does anybody have any any stories or anything that they have shared as far as conversations that they've had with their teams, you know, around social media, especially through a crisis. You know, I've had my my executive director that I work with. We have had to contact a few of our people that actually work within our organization, and we've had to monitor some of the things that they've put on their social media because they represent our organization. And if you're going to be part of our organization, you're going to be part of our culture, you're going to be part of us, then this is how we expect you to behave. So does anybody have any stories around this? That they'd like to share? Don't get complacent. Along with this is your brand is in your hands. So there's a lot of things that we don't have control over. There's a lot of things that we don't have control over. We don't have control over if we get laid off, if we get furloughed, if we take a 20% pay cut. There's so many things that are going on during this, or we have to get repurposed in the company, or we have to get over in a different lane. There's so many things during times like this, during a crisis, that we don't have control over, but our brand is in our own hands. Like, we have control over what our brand is. And we have control over what our brand is through a crisis, on how we communicate, how we respond, what we're talking about, how we're leading, how we're managing, and, you know, really what we're getting out there and talking about, how we are relating to our clients. But our brand is something that we can control. And so what is, and type in the chat box, what is one thing that you are focused on right now with your brand, your team's brand, or your organization's brand right now, that you are getting out there with your clients, whether it's emails, phone calls, or social media? Type that into the chat box, and I'll have Amy share those in a few minutes. And I was on with a client yesterday, and they've done a great job, and I want to share this with you. It's actually a company back in Minneapolis, and what their team has done, their C-suite has split, you know, all of their employees. So each C-suite has 60 to 70 different employees to call over the next 2 weeks, and they are touching base with every employee in the company to ask them how they're doing, how's your families doing, what can we do to help, and just for them to show them that they care. And I'm like, oh my gosh, and they're still running at full speed. I mean, they're an organization that's still considered essential, but they've got companies all over the United States, and they're calling each one of their employees to ask them how they're doing. So that's their brand internally. Nobody knows that they're doing this externally, but people will find out. So Coach Amy, can you share what some people have put in to the chat box, if anybody has put in? And if not,
we have some great ideas. Well, first of all, it's around having sort of clear and concise information. And then Kristen's company is doing some really sort of creative things around posting very positive messages, fun videos and tutorials. For instance, a local beverage distributor is doing a specialty, you know, cocktail video, mailing personal cards to keep in touch, online cooking class, doing a flower arrangement class video. Kristen, you know I would sign up for that one. We're digital experiences with cast members from Broadway in order to help partners on Broadway who are clearly out of work at the moment. Reiterating how grateful we are for fan sponsor support, sending out lots of thank you cards, checking in, sharing more personal stories about the team and staff on social media. I mean, so much of this is around connection. And, you know, what's interesting is that this really sort of touches on that personal side. None of these were sort of business oriented. And so great ideas, everyone.
That's great. And I'll get into that a little bit when we go organization, but a lot of it is the emotional side of things, is really connecting more on the emotional side of things. But your brand is in your hands, and how you are controlling it now. And again, were we doing these before this happened? these are some of the things that people need now. They need humor, they need gratefulness, they need connection, they need, dance parties or whatever it is to keep people busy and connected. And then what is our brand going to look like as we get to the other side of this? Is it going to be, we going to go back to this, or are we going to have a mixture of what we're doing because this is what people want? So that's something for all of you to think about moving forward, but your brand is in your hands, and that's something that you have control over individually and also for your business. And the fourth thing, it's about we and not me. And so if we think that, hey, this is just what I want to do, but we have to think about what is best for the organization, what is best for my family, what is best for the company, but it's not about what I want to do and what I want to put out there on social media or what I want to not do or what I do, but it's thinking about the whole picture. It's thinking about, what am I doing for the organization posting this, or what am I doing if I'm not responsive, or if I don't do these things. But I think we have to think about the bigger picture, but it's about the we and not the me. And so if we can kind of think that way, I think that's important to really, think about yourself, but also to think about, your team, organizationally as well. I want to go over two things here organizationally. So that was more of your individual brand, but organizationally, your brand is your culture. And, I talked about, I think it was a couple podcasts before, as I talked about leadership, leading through a crisis. You're bad leaders that, things bottom out really fast. When you go through difficult times and you go through things like this, is companies don't survive, people don't survive. But your brand is really your culture, and really how you get through this is your values and putting people first, and a lot of those things, as well as really your brand really becomes the fabric of your organization and your culture. It really becomes the fabric, and you fall and crumble fast if you don't have a strong brand, and really what you stand for. And those companies that do really sustain and they really hold steady to get through this, and really putting people first in your company as well. Another thing is being extremely social, that social responsibility. That is a big part of a company's brand right now. You look at what Medtronic's doing back in Minneapolis, and really the things that they had put aside, that they were really focused on with pacemakers and the things that they were doing very innovatively. They put everything aside to make ventilators. Really what Target has done. These are some of the companies that I do follow in Minneapolis, and some of the things that they've done, what the Haynes Corporation has done, what some smaller organizations are doing to, feed those school children that are in the schools where they really depend on meals. Some of these organizations are feeding those kids. But what is your brand going to look like as a company as you get through this? And is really that social responsibility is really coming out and being, really first and foremost out there. And I think when you focus on this, when you get through this to the other side, what was your brand before as an organization? What are you doing now being socially responsible? And then what is it going to look like as you get through this? There's going to be so many more companies that are doing things more in their community and giving back more. And the last one that I'll share with you is around communication. Organizationally, how are we communicating, through this, and really developing, a much deeper trust, deeper integrity in your reputation. And I would say this also as an individual. How are you communicating to people? How are you communicating on social media? Are people going to trust you? Do you have integrity? What's your reputation? And as we continue to go through, the weeks and the months, and hopefully it's not going to be too many months. Hopefully we're just talking about days and weeks here. But if things don't work out for us individually, and this is something you should be helping with your team. And I'm trying to trying to put this into words, is we need to always be teaching and educating ourselves, but teaching and educating the people that are around us. Is if for some reason I get laid off or I get furloughed or I lose my job, what is my reputation? What is my brand? What is my credibility now going out and looking for another job in a couple months? So how have I been representing myself and my brand, with not just within my organization, but putting it out there? And so that is something that's very relevant today. There is going to be 25 to 30% of our country that is going to be unemployed. And so what are we doing now in managing our brand as we go through this crisis? Because I might be in a completely different situation in a month or two. And how am I managing that to put my best foot forward? Also around communication, organizationally, is everything is happening so fast. And around communication is you got to be fast, you got to be proactive. Everything's around trust, integrity, and reputation, and this isn't easy. This is something that we have to manage every single day because it is the fabric of our business. But we've got to be fast, we got to be proactive. And we were just talking, Amy and I were talking about our social media and the things that we're actually getting out. And I'm sure everybody runs their business on a month calendar. Everybody's got it scheduled for a month. Well, things are different than they were last week. Things are different than they were 2 days ago. And so we've got to be able to shift and adjust to really what we're talking about and how we're communicating because of our reputation, because the things that maybe your company or you're putting out is not relevant anymore. So we've got to be able to talk about the things, be fast, be proactive, be able to shift lanes, be able to adjust to what is going on 2 days ago. Tomorrow's going to be very different. So we've got to be able to shift quickly. And then our brand equity is really our belief system. And a couple podcasts ago, I talked about our value system. But what is our brand equity when we get through this? Is, that equity, have we filled the bucket? Have we got a lot of equity into what we have done? Is we want to be able to exceed expectations and grow over time. And so that brand equity is everything that we've put into before this started. Is what does our equity look like before? I would say, for myself, people trust me, credibility, deliver, honest, successful. I expect excellence. I'm going to challenge people. What is that now? Brand equity. Well, it's everything that I was doing before, but now it's just like caring, empathy, listening, compassionate, doing many things pro bono for companies, small businesses, organizations, clients, teams, being there for people, doing these free podcasts, touching base with people that have gotten laid off, furloughed, or fired because people need to change and shift and reinvent themselves into a different industry. And so it's what can we do for our brand equity to give back during this crisis? And what is it going to look like when we get out of this? You're still going to have that brand, that reputation, that excellence, that trust, that credibility, that excellence, that next level. And now you've added some of these other things that you've been able to give back to people socially, that we've exceeded people's expectations that grow over time. And then what is it going to look like when we get through this? It's just going to be, hopefully you can say it's going to be stronger. It's going to be deeper. It's going to be broader. You've taken your reputation to the next level. You have been able to build a deeper trust with people. People know that you are giving back. So really identifying that brand equity that you have individually, and also what your company and your organization's brand equity is as well with your vendors and your clients as well. So here's 3 questions for all of you to ask yourself. Amy, is there any questions? I want to take some questions so think about some questions if there's anything. There's many times during the course when I was coaching, there was different types of crisis within our programs. That affects your program, that affects your campus, that affects your community. And when there was any crisis that was going on in my program, because it was in the Big Ten and it was very visible, and it was highly visible being in a city, and also nationally as well, because you got ESPN picking up all the news. There's ways that you have to be able to handle your brand as a leader individually, but also be able to handle your program and your organization's brand as well as you go through a crisis. So unfortunately and fortunately, I've done it a few times. I don't want to say a couple handful of times, but probably a handful of times I've had to handle my own brand. I've had to manage my own brand through a crisis. I've had to manage my teams and my programs brand through a crisis. And I've been part of a department in the athletic department at the University of Minnesota where we've all had to manage our brand. If anybody knows about the athletic department at Minnesota, the brand wasn't great at points because of different things that's happening. But there's ways that you can manage that brand as you're going through a crisis as well. So is your brand ready for a crisis? So ask yourself, is your brand built up enough in that credibility and that reputation and in hard work, preparation, toughness? That, you know, that's how I would describe my team's brand. But was it ready for a crisis? And I would say, yes, my brand was ready for a crisis. It just looks different going through a crisis now, but it's going to be so much, it's going to be bigger, faster, stronger when we get through the crisis, because it's going to mean something else. Do you remove social media posts that you have posted on social media? You know, after thinking about your brand and your reputation and say, hey, I have a job now, but who knows in a month or two if I'm going to have a job? Do I need to remove some social media posts? Do I need to build deeper relationships with other people across the organization? What do I need to be doing more of through this? Do you remove social media posts, or do you need to get more active on social media and that digital platform because you do control your own brand? And then, do you have brand equity? Do you have brand equity that exceeds expectations? And do you have brand equity individually and also within your company that's going to grow over time? So Coach Amy, is there any, I want to take some questions now around, you know, managing your brand, managing your team, ego, and also your organization through a crisis, and really having that vision for what you really want it to look like after we get through this.
Well, one of the questions that popped up a little earlier was, how do you navigate and coach your team specifically through adversity or through a crisis? What are a couple of key things that you can do to help them?
Oh, I got to take myself back and put myself in all those crises. You talk about, you go back and talk about your values. You talk about your values as a program, and you have to be confident as a leader going through this and say, we're going to get through this. There's going to be some things that we're going to have to do to adjust, but here's some things you can expect from me as a leader. Transparency. You're gonna get honesty from me. We're gonna communicate with you every single day. You're gonna get the truth. And I think people want transparency and honesty through a crisis. And that also that, you know, people want to know about their safety as well. We are going to take care of you. We are going to be here for you. You know, I was available 24 hours a day on my phone, you know, if I would check in with people, how they were doing. So that communication and checking in with people, communicating to them that we're going to get through this and being positive, keeping your people engaged as well and connected. And, you know, when you go through a crisis as a team, is you were connected before as a team, but you become even so much closer and more connected as a team. Like you just become a whole different team during and after that as well. And you just keep the team moving forward. You know, you try to keep some normalcy with focus and discipline, and keep teams moving forward, and keeping some of those goals and that strategy in mind to keep people busy and thinking less about what's going on around them is very, very important. It's very difficult as a leader because you're trying to do that yourself, because everybody's worried about me, myself, and I. But when you're responsible for a team And as a coach, I was responsible for a support team, my staff, my kids, my support staff, my campus community, my fans, people in the community. There are so many different people that as a leader that I felt like I was needed to be responsible for, and helping other people get through something like this. Is there any more questions before we say goodbye today? This was a lot of information, and this is something that I think about every single day. I really do. I think about this every single day. I feel like I have a pretty decent brand. I feel like my business has a pretty decent brand. There's a different focus around what the brand looks like now every single day on what gets out there, what gets communicated, and then a vision for, are we going to have brand equity getting through this? I say yes. Can it be bigger? Can it be stronger? Absolutely. We can be doing more. I can be doing more. And so what does this look like, for all of us individually, where people are going to say, I want to hire you. I want you on my team. You are a rock star getting through this. This is what you helped me do. This is what you helped our team do. This is what you helped our company do. Wow, your true colors really came out during this crisis. And like the best came out of you, or did the worst come out of you? What do you need to be doing more or less of on social media? What do I need to take down? I post a lot about my dogs on Instagram and also Facebook. I don't put it on LinkedIn, but I post a lot about my dogs on social media because they bring me a lot of joy. They bring a lot of other people joy. People laugh, people smile. People ask me like, where's the Louie Chronicles? Where's the pictures of your dogs? And so I'm very active on that part of social media with my dogs, especially now to give people joy. And then do you have that brand equity where it exceeds expectations and it's really going to grow over time? Your business and also individually. So are there any more last comments, Coach Amy, that you want to read from people before we end? But thank you everyone for joining us today. I know I have a lot of work to do in this area. I will be extremely vulnerable and hold myself accountable that I work really hard on my brand. I work really hard on our business's brand. I've got a lot of work to do through this crisis, and also it's even more overwhelming when I think about, what we need to do to get through this as well. Is there any comments, Amy?
So the comments are, there's a lot of gratitude, and a lot of people found the information super helpful. They're going to start implementing it. It was just what they needed at this time. Danny is very interested in getting one of your books and an autographed copy. So we will follow up with you, Danny. And I just think for a lot of people, it sounds like this information and this message hit at exactly the right time.
Great. Those 4 comments again is have a plan. Don't get complacent. Don't get sloppy. Don't put BS on social media. Your brand is in your hands. It's about we, not me, and what's best for me right now, but it's about we. And then organizationally, as you continue through this and your brand is your culture, and then communication, be fast, be relevant, be able to shift, and then really answer these questions. And I know I have a lot of work today on my brand and our brand as a company. And, this is something that, like I said, is on my mind every single day. So, Danny, if you want to make sure that you put your, my website is pambortonpartners.com. You can go on and get a book there. And we all know that our postal services are still open, and we can get that out pretty soon. But thank you guys very much, and we will see you next week. Amy will be on Tuesday and managing your career. Hopefully the unemployment has not gone up even more next week. So she will be online at this time on Tuesday in career management, and I will be back online next Thursday on leading through a crisis. Thank you very much. Enjoy your day, everyone.